Yeah, so me and my wife both, we have a long kind of history when it comes to some of this lived experience and exploitation. So it's always been a passion of mine, even way before law enforcement. So I was keenly aware of it way before I even became a cop. And then I actually told myself before I became a law enforcement officer that if I ever become a law enforcement officer, I want to do something about this. Because we all drive by them, we're like, how come they exist? How can we let this happen? And once I started working on it, I realized how difficult it really can be. So to answer your questions, there are about 35 to 40 illicit massage businesses in Jefferson County that would fall under that category. So, and I think we have about 375 massage businesses. Most of them are legitimate, but these particular businesses give the industry a bad name. And it's really important that we do something about it because the exploitation within these businesses is very severe on many different levels. So
why is it that this issue is so personal for you? If you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, I was born and raised in Germany. I came to this country on my own and was left at the airport in Portland, Oregon when I first arrived back in '97, kind of old. So, and so I was kind of a houseless, homeless teenager from day one. And, when you don't have anybody in your corner, people will take advantage of you. And then my wife is from the Philippines, actually, and she has personal lived experience when it comes to trafficking, where she was confined in a house in Manila for about 10 months. And so it's been something that's been a part of our family. And my wife actually spoke on that topic way before I even did, like 10 years ago. So, so it's something that's really, really important to me. And a lot of times people that are caught in these situations, they do not self-identify, right? And so it's that makes it even more difficult to kind of help them realize that they're really victims. So you don't really realize it until you're out of it, So it's a very complex issue, has a lot of nuances involved, and especially with this, because the women that work in these places, generally, they're middle-aged, right? And so a lot of them come from Asia, not all of them. Mainly here, they're Korean or Chinese, but we have Thai, European, Russian, mainly Korean or Chinese. And in China, the culture is just, very different. And so there's a lot of shame associated, right? And these women, they're brought over here, through not a lawful process, and they pay about 10 to 20, maybe $30,000 to come in to get this whole fraudulent immigration licensing process done to work in these places. And then they're surprised when they're coerced into providing services that they didn't sign up for, if you know what I mean. And there's so much shame associated, they'd rather not speak out about it or bring shame on their families. Because in China, for example, if you're older, female, you're not married, you don't have kids, and you come from a rural area, then you're considered, I think the term is sheng nu in Chinese means leftovers, like a leftover person. And so one way for them to provide for their families would be to sign up for something like this and maybe have some use and send some money back. So there's just a small little kind of background on that culturally. So many different moving parts, yeah.
I guess what is the help or resources that you're able to give these women who are maybe in this system that you've kind of unveiled so far?
Yeah, so as part of our task force, we have several victim service providers and different nonprofits that are a part of that. Also start networking with Korean churches in the area. I guess there's quite a few of them that I wasn't aware of, and sat down with them, and they're also very open to helping, with translation and different, anything they can do to help if someone self-identifies and if there is an outcry. And I talk to law enforcement and AG's offices around the country about this frequently, places like Texas, Georgia, Florida, that are kind of at the tip of the spear of this, and they all kind of say the same thing. It's very rare, that someone would self-identify, but you always ask and you always offer help, and we always do that. So it's just, man, it's a tough vicious cycle. There've been instances where people have, stepped up and wanted help, but it's rare, and so we kind of have to work this apart, from the victim worker, and just kind of look at this as, hey, what are they doing wrong as businesses, and how can we crack down? How can we create an unfriendly environment in the city for them to not exist here, which is what this ordinance really, is meant to accomplish. Because, I mean, we're not responsible what happens in Texas and Chicago, and it's all terrible, of course, but if we can clean up our city, and if we can set a precedent that in Louisville we will not allow exploitation to happen, we're gonna make it as impossible as we can for you to do this kind of business here. I think we'd step up and really, provide leadership nationwide in this area on how to handle this, because that's definitely very important. As law enforcement resources are limited, so we all have to collaborate and use every resource available to combat this, from different angles.
Yeah. How do you kind of learn about one of these then? Kind of in that light, like, do you get tipped off about them, or kind of how does LMPD or the city, I guess, get notified that, hey, this business might be doing something?
Yeah, sometimes people will give anonymous tips, but usually when you get those tips, people know, it's like, why were you there in the first place, right? It's not massage envy, so, and I think that, there's certain elements to it, that you can start to realize, oftentimes, not always, Asian-based, right? A lot of times their windows are covered, their doors are locked, there's an excessive amount of cameras, things of that nature, they're open late, and several other indicators. And they also usually advertise on websites and databases that are known to law enforcement where illicit services are basically being promoted. And a lot of times, we can use, certain investigative tools available to us to figure out who's doing that, how many people are doing that. And then there's certain websites that these customers use and even pay to be a part of and think that they're safe and kind of exchange their experiences, sadly, to great detail sometimes on what goes on. And it's almost like a sickness, and I would say. So it's very easy to kind of find out once you start digging, in that underbelly. Yeah.
With places like this, have you found not only exploitation, but then, being connected to other like sorts of crime, maybe like drugs or anything like that? Have you seen that at all yet?
Yeah, I mean, they're all connected, right, for the most part. So there's, it's an interesting business. So you can buy one of these franchises for $30,000 to $50,000, if you're connected, and then sell it again as well if you don't want it anymore. And obviously the working women have to be provided from somewhere, so if you have one of these businesses, these people don't apply to you through legal channels or through appropriate channels. And so you already have to be connected to some kind of, organized illicit activity. And, they get these people that work in this business, they get moved, so if there are 2 or 3 people working in one business over the course of the year, it's probably closer, maybe 20 plus women that'll come through there in the course of a year. And so, basically if you, close one of these here in Louisville, however you do it, you're preventing, 20 plus women from being exploited at that location if you look at it that way, so it's hard to quantify. But yeah, they commit all kinds of they have a long list of felonies, I don't want to give out the whole playbook here, but it's a long list. People that commit one crime are usually willing to commit another. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll ask one more question.
Sure.
So the 35 to 40 illicit businesses that you've identified already, has action been taken against those yet, or are they still operating?
So as far as, we have a whole task force, there's probably 20, 30, 40 people, over 30 now, I think, a part of it. We have several subcommittees, and we're having kind of a strategic plan on how we're addressing them based on, severity and how, how much activity is going on that we're determining. But yeah, we're taking action. In the 6th division where I work, there's several that have been closed, and it's been something I've been passionate about for a long time. But now I think we're doing more than we ever have in Louisville, and we have all the right people around the table. And as long as we stay on it, this ordinance gets passed, and we continue to work together. The right hand knows what the left hand is doing, and we kind of all collaborate and work together with all the different approaches, from criminal down to civil to landlord engagement. I think we can really squeeze them out, help victims, and hold bad actors accountable, whether it's by making it very expensive for them to shut down and go somewhere else, or, pursuing, criminal charges in some cases. So, yeah.
We got some video of you going into some of these businesses, busting some of these businesses. What are those experiences kind of like when you're able to find one and expose it, I guess?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. So it's been, I've learned a lot over the years, and there's so many different ways to kind of approach it. But, an easy way to do it is, to check for licenses and things, because everybody that's legal has to have certain things in place, correct? And if they don't, then they can be confronted with that and even told, hey, man, you're doing things wrong, and just let them know that we're here. And so it's sobering. It's definitely like you have the sense that, obviously a lot of wrong things are happening here. But I think what makes me feel best about it is when I'm in there and I see, customers, men waiting, and I can tell them to leave, so that's, a handful of guys less that have the opportunity to purchase these services and, exploit these women, in essence, in my opinion. So I think that's great, and it makes them lose business, so we want to support good businesses, and they don't belong in that category, I would say.
Would you be able to talk a little bit about what the conversations with the women workers look like? I know you mentioned that a lot of the times they don't, come out and, confess anything. Sometimes they do. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that? I'm assuming there are sometimes hard conversations to have.
Yeah, a lot of times there's a big language barrier, but sometimes they speak good enough English, and it's tough. They're always tough. I mean, always offer help and even try to explain to them that they're not in trouble. This is not their fault. I think one of the most important lessons in law enforcement, and I've learned that, and I've experienced that personally. I can't get into it now, but years ago, where we can't criminalize people for the unlawful acts that they've committed, based on their exploitative experiences, and hurt them in that sense. And so they know they're not the victim. And we just need to make sure that, we offer them help and offer them help and offer them help, but it's going to be up to them to take that step too. They have to be part of their own survival, but a lot of times their community is so small and they don't want to leave the pack. They don't want to necessarily attach themselves to American law enforcement. And there's so many cultural barriers, but we always offer it. And to that point, might I add, like, I have cited for practicing without a massage, right? And so, but that helps, in my opinion. That can help, just like a notice of violation, because it helps us get information, and it provides another opportunity for them to ask for help. And also, what it did in that one case in the video that you saw, it helped get a cease and desist order, helped us get to the landlord, helped us evict the business, and it helped us to ensure that exploitation doesn't happen at that location anymore. So there's so many nuances. There's actually been studies done on what makes people leave a life of exploitation. And you'd be amazed at, some of the myths that's been busted. And sometimes citation, arrest, and those kinds of experiences with law enforcement causes people to want to leave, So it's really, there's so many nuances. It's not black and white. We just have to kind of understand the totality of the circumstances, in my opinion, to do what's best for the victim, to do what's best for the community, and to make sure we just don't allow exploitation, and we treat them with kindness and utmost respect. We don't put them in handcuffs. We don't, treat them like criminals. And we give them options, because one of the first steps to trauma-informed processes, right, is to give people options. And so we don't force them to cooperate.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, I talked a lot.